You know, I had my daughter and son later in life. Don't get me wrong. I expect the last or next third of my life to be amazing. But what I really care about is leaving my kiddos better off than I had it. It's not for me to decide what you care about. But after 35 years of law practice, I've found that most everybody cares about something. And what we try to do through your estate planning is make what you care about a reality. Welcome. Congrats for taking a little bit of time out of your day, out of your life, to examine the subject of estate planning and how it's all about YOU, you. Thus the Three Dog Night song, You. Yes, I enjoy music, and they were my first concert a long, long time ago. My team says I should keep this short, but I'm bursting with information and energy. So I'm going to try to impart as much information to you as I can without infringing on too much of your time. If you do have a question, feel free to type it in the chat bar, and I'll try to take questions as time allows. If it's something relevant to what I'm talking about right in the middle, I may interrupt and pick it up, or I may pick the question up at the end. The only thing I like to say is that no question is a bad question except the unasked question. So please don't leave this with a general question about estate planning. But if it's something really specific, really fact specific, or very personal to you, write it down. And we'll cover it in a one-to-one later, and I'll tell you about that at the end of this session. Very, very quickly, I'm John Miller, the founding attorney of Rock Solid Law. As I indicated, I've practiced law 35 years, all of it here in Northeast Florida. Rock Solid Law does three things. We do estate planning, obviously, together with probate only when necessary. We represent entrepreneurial small business owners, and we do commercial and residential closings, including title and escrow. That is through Rock Solid Title. With respect to the estate planning particularly, we have a really neat development in the last year or so where I've been invited into a national team to become a member of a loosely aligned network which is arguably unsurpassed in excellence in estate planning. The clientele from this group includes everything from mom and pops to a former president of the United States of America. There is not an estate planning issue that this group has not handled and can't offer strategies for you. But this isn't about me. As the title of the workshop says, it's about you. We're going to focus on why estate planning is about YOU, you. It's about how you wish to be treated as you age. It's about writing the ultimate chapters of your heroic life so that you will be celebrated when the time comes. It can be about your legacy. It can be about your heirs. Most of us care about something that is bigger than ourselves. Most of us care about something bigger than ourselves. And what we try to do at Rock Solid Law, which I think is a little bit different, I know is a little bit different than most firms, is that we enter into a journey with you to discover what your values are and what your concerns are so that we can incorporate those into this story you're writing. It's about deciding whether you're going to only pay the mandatory taxes or whether you're going to choose to pay voluntary taxes too. It's about maximizing your prosperity during your life. So yes, estate planning is about your living for the remainder of your life, as well as what goes on afterwards. Yeah, it's about how you're going to share your love and your life's abundance with those you treasure. It's about how you're going to share those attributes and when you want to share those attributes. And we always keep in mind to do it all at the least expense possible. This is a different approach than I think you're going to find other places. We believe estate planning is about celebrating your legacy. So you tell your story based on your values. To get there, we explore your story. And we call this showing your love to those you treasure. People talk about estate planning like it's about death, or about a will, or about a trust, or about a living will, or about any number of other things. It's not. Estate planning is about writing the story of your life with an emphasis on what you value and what your goals are. Okay? That other view is like looking at a beautiful race car and wondering where the bolts were manufactured. It's like looking at a masterpiece painting and wondering where they bought the paint, what the brand is of the paint. We seek to implement your personal family values through your estate plan. Did you know that by failing to act, you're making choices that can hurt your loved ones and yourself? One of the ways I like to make the points about how estate planning is important is by telling stories. So first we're going to examine how estate planning is about you and how it's about taking care of yourself during the remainder of your life. Close your eyes. I'm going to say a name. I want you to imagine this guy. Groucho Marx. I'm betting you had heavy eyebrows, big glasses, a big smile, maybe a tuxedo, and a cigar coming out the side of his mouth. Groucho Marx was the biggest of the big Hollywood stars during the golden age of Hollywood. And he reaped all the rewards. He became unbelievably famous. He became unbelievably rich. He lived an amazing life by all accounts. But sadly, Groucho outlived the other Marx brothers, and he also outlived his ability to take care of himself. All of those managers, all those advisors, all those hanging-ons, all that money, and during his whole life, nobody had gotten him to go and do a simple estate plan. So when he became unable to take care of himself, somebody else had to do it. And he was worth a fortune. So different people wanted to be the ones who took care of Groucho Marx. At this point, he was kind of a sad little man. So what happens in that case, when you don't set out who you'd like to be in charge of taking care of you, is a guardianship action. A guardianship is where people present their various perspectives and cases and ask to be put in legal charge of you. In this case, they were going to take care of Groucho, but they were also going, you got it, to take care of his fortune. So there are various interested parties in taking care of the fortune of Groucho Marx. And Groucho had to sit in the courtroom and watch this play out in front of him. A lot of people will call this a living probate. You actually have to watch the probate fight happen in front of you. There's a photo of Groucho in a wheelchair in the courtroom with a blanket over his lap, kind of shriveled up, kind of sad looking, and a tear coming down his face because he realized it wasn't out of love that these people wanted to be his guardian, but it was out of desire to control his fortune. So somebody was eventually appointed as guardian. And you know who paid for that whole procedure? The lawyers, everybody there, the experts. Groucho did. Came out of his money. And sadly, he didn't live a whole lot longer after that. So guess what? They had to have a probate all over again. All of that could have been avoided with a simple estate plan. In his case, there certainly was sufficient funds in the estate to have done something about it. By not acting, he made a choice. He made a choice that he was going to put himself through that guardianship proceeding, and he made a choice that after he died, his estate was going to go through probate. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Folks, something that sticks in my craw, there are so-called reputable law firms around here who are intentionally putting their clients through probate. Why? Who do you think makes money in a probate action? The attorney. I have a friend in the financial world, who calls it a retirement annuity for lawyers. Probate is the action that has to be filed at court whenever you leave a last will and testament, or if you die with no will at all. Probate is a decent mechanism for distributing, but as we'll see in this next few minutes, it always involves significant shrinkage to the estate, and your heirs don't get what you had intended for them to get. Has anybody ever told you that by continuing to procrastinate, you may be putting your children's lives at risk? I'd give anything if we were all in the same room so I could get to know you a little bit better. So I don't know who on this call may have minor children. Appointing someone who's going to take care of those minor children, both themselves to raise them and on the financial side, is so, so important. I'd like to tell a story about this issue from a colleague of mine, one I've actually referred cases to, and she's referred them to me. My colleague practices in another state, and her mother lives in the same city she does. I'll tell you that she tells me that her mom has lived a very small life. She has sort of lived a scared life. She has not done a whole lot with this life. You see, when she was a little girl, she had a sister, a little bit older sister, and they were being raised by a single mom. This is a long time ago, so that was less usual than it is now, but it happens all the time these days. And there was a nanny or a babysitter or something like that, and one night, they lived in a northeastern city. One night, the mom went out. I've never been told what she was doing. And the girls were left home with the sitter, but that was okay with them because they knew this lady, and everything was fine until mom didn't come home. Obviously, worry became concern, and then horrors, mom never came home. Mom died that night. Well, by the time the government and the police figured out what had happened, they came to the house. The first thing they did was they sent that nanny away. Even though that was the only adult the children really had the relationship with, she had no legal right to those children. So they left with the police. And sadly, because the girls were different ages, they were sent to 2 different homes. So now they're dealing with the loss of their mom, the loss of the adult nanny who had been taking care of them, and been separated from each other. My friend, who has dedicated her life as an attorney to making sure this doesn't happen to other children, says that her mother really never has gotten over this childhood trauma, and that that's the reason that she has lived a very shy and retiring life. This did not have to happen. With a very little bit of estate planning, just a pre-need guardian, a guardian document, if nothing else, a person could have been named who could have taken care of both of those little girls together, right? And if you have fur babies, you know where they're going when you don't leave them to somebody too. So those 2 little girls could have been left to a relative or some other family member or even a close friend to raise them when mom was no longer able to do it. A small silver lining to this story is that eventually the relatives of the family did learn about the situation and were able to come in and were able to obtain guardianship, again through the courts, over these 2 girls. So eventually they were reunited and grew up together. In addition to the goal of estate planning of taking care of our children, for me that ties into what I call not burning down the family tree. One of the worst parts of the areas of law that I have chosen is watching the fights that break out in families after the previous generation passes. And it can be over something as silly as grandma's cake plate, the red stemmed glasses, or $5,000. I have seen families that will never talk to each other because they fought over what was left after the previous generation passed. And I'm going to share with you a story from my own practice. And of course, the names will be changed to protect the innocent. I'm going to call this fellow Stan. Now, Stan was my client, and he was a really interesting guy. He first hired me to do some real estate work for him. Stan had been an immigrant about the time of the Second World War, and he enlisted and fought for his new country. As a result, following the war, he was able to take advantage of the GI Bill. He was a smart man. He got his education and ended up with a PhD in physics from Harvard. Extraordinary brain. Interesting individual. And he had a great career with a Fortune 500 company, the name of which you know if I could tell you. Now, Stan was a fabulously intelligent guy, but he also was a bit quirky and remained a lifelong bachelor. Stan's parents predeceased him, and he had one sister. That sister had two daughters. Unfortunately, his sister also predeceased him, so the only family he really had in the world were his nieces. Now, these nieces, as I like to tell the story, were straight out of Hollywood casting. Maybe you want to think of the Wizard of Oz. You had the good witch and you had the bad witch. The good witch had a son, and that little boy was the absolute apple of Stan's eye. Stan was an interesting character in addition to his career as a physicist. He loved to collect coins, rare coins, Greek and Roman coins, complete sets of coins, all sorts of different coins was one of his great passions. And one of the things he loved to do was take a set of those coins from Florida back to the state in which the rest of his family lived, his niece, and take them to that little boy. He started out with the complete set of the pennies, the wheat penny or whatever. And then he took the nickels. And eventually he had planned to give the full set of all of his coins to his nephew, the apple of his eye. Now, as I said, I'd represented him on a real estate deal, and a few years later he called me up. He said, "Mr. Miller." He always called me Mr. Miller, very formal gentleman. And I said, "Good to hear from you again, sir. What can I help you with?" He says, "Well, look, I need to do some estate planning, and I want the power of attorney, and I want the healthcare surrogate, and I want the other documents like that, but I'm not ready to do my will yet." And I said, "Well, that doesn't really make any sense. You see, the will is the cornerstone of your estate plan. So we really should do a will, and you can always change it later." He said, "Well, I just haven't quite decided everything I'm going to do, and so I'll do the will later, but I want to hire you, Mr. Miller, to do these other documents." And so we did. Now, this is some years ago in my practice, and I'd like to think that my powers of persuasion have increased and that I would be able to talk him into doing those documents today, but back then I wasn't able to do so. So we did what he asked, and I said, when he came in, I said, "You really need to do the will. That's the main thing that we need to get done for you." And he said, "No, I'm not ready. I'll be back in 3 years. I'll never forget it. 3 years, I'm going to come do my will." I said, "Yes, sir, that'll be fine. It's not what I prefer. It's not what I recommend, but you're the client. You're in charge. And I'll look forward to doing that for you when the time comes." 6 months later, I returned to my office from an out-of-office meeting, and there was a message there, and Stan had called. I always enjoyed him, as I hope you could tell, so I called him back right away. I said, "How are you?" He said, "Mr. Miller, not good." I said, "What's happening?" He said, "Well, I have a very aggressive form of cancer." And I'll never forget, he said, "I'm dying, and I ain't got no will." Now, my Harvard-educated physicist friend didn't talk like "ain't got no" at any other time that I knew him, but that's how he expressed the urgency of what he needed to do. So we had a quick chat on that phone call. I bet you can guess what he told me. He had finally come to the decision that he was going to give everything to the mom of the little boy who was the apple of his eye. And he'd finally brought himself to being able to essentially disinherit the bad witch. So he asked me if I'd hurry up and draft that document, and I said, yes, I would. So I did, and I called him back, I believe it was that same afternoon. And he said, I'm tired. I don't want to get together today. Call me tomorrow morning. And so I did. And I called him the next morning, and I said, when can we get together? He said, today they're taking me to hospice, and I'll be comfortable there. And so why don't you plan to come tomorrow? And I said, well, sir, that'll be fine. The hospice is not far, but let's make sure we make this appointment and get this done. He said, yes, sir, Mr. Miller, we're going to get this will signed. Well, the next morning, I didn't even go to my office. I went straight to the hospice. And the nursing staff was really kind there, and they took me straight back in to see my client with my will in my hand. And back at that point in time, they would even act as witnesses for a will. And there was my client, and he was out cold, I think you'd say. He was not conscious. The nurse did everything she could to wake him up, yelling his name, shaking him around. And he never regained consciousness. And he never regained consciousness ever again. By that one day, he missed signing his will. And people have asked me often when I tell this story, but doesn't the existence of the will prove that that was his intent? No, my friends, it actually is proof that he intended not to sign it. So you probably can guess what happened. That was the best day ever for the bad witch because she was no longer disinherited. So she began suing. And she sued, and the lawsuit dragged on for over 3 years. And as an end result in the settlement of that suit, the mom of the little boy bought the coin collection from the estate, which meant paying it to her sister, who had already cleaned out the bank account because she could. One day too late. We all work hard in our lives to amass a basis of wealth, and we hope to pass that on to make the lives of our future generations better. The one thing we really don't know ever, how much time we have. I think time's our most valuable commodity, and we need to not waste it. Don't let that one darn day go by. Make sure you take care of your families. Now, I don't want to let you leave this workshop without a little bit of nuts and bolts about the documents that are contained in the estate plan. When I don't talk about documents, people don't think they got their time's worth. So I think you've already heard my opinion of probate. Probate puts a judge in charge. A probate essentially puts the government in charge. A probate is going to diminish your estate for a couple by a minimum of 10%. So if you were leaving $1 million, kids are almost automatically going to get $900,000. A probate is also public. A probate also takes time. And a probate is where the emotions come out. And I believe during that period of time, the deceased person's legacy is impacted negatively. So, what is an estate plan? What does it do for you? A will, last will and testament, is the basic document of a package. A last will and testament sets forth who's going to be in charge, be your personal representative, and tells who's going to inherit after you're finished with your worldly goods. A last will and testament must go through a court proceeding called a probate in order to be effective. A will is not enforceable until it is properly filed in accordance with the rules with the court and everybody gets notice. Okay? So, I say probate sucks. It sucks away wealth from your family. into the hands of attorneys, snoops, fake creditors, and others. Yes, there are people out there that file as creditors in probate cases with no right to do so, just hoping it'll slip through and get paid. This doesn't mention that it's public record forever. Most of my clients don't want their laundry out there at the courthouse for people to go look at. And I've alluded to it already, probate is where families fight. I have seen it. I know we all look around and think, not my family, but there seems to be an opportunity for old ills to get raised in a probate proceeding. Probate is a voluntary tax you impose on yourself. Remember I said earlier, you're going to pay the voluntary ones? That's one right there. It's entirely unnecessary. Let me ask you a question. You know how much Rosa Parks was worth when she died? Neither do I. And we never will. You know why? One of the members of the team that I've been invited into did her estate plan and based it on a trust. A trust is an instrument which starts during our life and continues on past our lifetime. A trust is the only way we can control our assets past our death. A trust puts someone in charge to follow our game plan of where things are going. A trust can decide that our children don't inherit everything at 18, but get pieces at whatever years we say, 30, 35, 40. A trust avoids all of those issues of probate. A trust is private. A trust keeps your family business in your family. That's so important. I'm going to try to say it right. A trust keeps your family business in your family. A trust keeps all those snoops out of your business. And a trust to administer is significantly less expensive than a probate, because you just file a notice of trust and you're done with the government, done with the judges, and you're relying on who you chose to carry out your wishes. A trust-based plan will have what's called a pour-over will as part of it. Any plan will have a power of attorney. That's the person that's going to take care of your business during your lifetime. That's called an attorney in fact. Every plan will have a healthcare surrogate. That's who's going to take care of you when you're hospitalized with the doctor and can't make decisions for yourself. And there's another document which I've retitled a directive to physician, which has traditionally been known as a living will, which I think is a terrible name because it's so confusing with the last will. I call the living will or the physician's directive your ticket to ride. That's how you set forth how you want to be treated during your last illness. So that's the administer these procedures, don't administer those, whatever is your preference. But you are in charge. And in Florida, you directly instruct the physicians how to treat you. And it's not that you have to leave one of your kids one of those hard decisions, like when to turn off the life support system. All of these documents are very, very important. And there are a ton of lawyers who can draft a really good document, right? The thing that's most important is the planning aspect and the advice aspect behind the documents that you choose to enter. Let's talk about probate a few minutes ago. A sad fact in America is that 80% of us go through probate. That means we either die without a will at all, or we have only a will and not a trust. 80% of people fail to plan to avoid probate to make life easier on the people they love the most. 8 out of 10 people, adult human beings, have a plan that's going to end up in a probate, and the statistics show the average shrinkage through probate is 60%. Think about that. If you had $100,000, your heirs only get 40 of it. If you got $1 million, they only get 400,000. That's on average. Now, our goal is to strengthen that family tree So we want to get rid of all of those unnecessary taxes and burdens, and we want to help you pass as close to 100% as you possibly can to your heirs. So an example of a probate comes from the national team. A client came in complaining about an attorney they just had. That attorney had cut the probate fee from 3%, which is statutory, to 1%. Hey, what a nice guy, huh? The probate had been over a single property. It was purchased a long time before, and it had accelerated in value. So it was worth millions. So the probate fee was only $105,000 to probate a single asset. $105,000, right? That could have all been avoided for a fifth of that, maybe less, depending on the circumstances of the family. Wasn't my client, I don't know, but those are the kind of things that can be avoided. Can you imagine being able to save $100,000 in one fell swoop? Seems good to me. By the way, I'm sure everybody online fits the category. 95% of Americans really do need to have an estate plan. The very most impoverished people below the poverty line really don't need one because it's not going to cause any effect when they pass. So, estate planning is about keeping all or as much as possible of what you've earned for who or what you want to get it. And when I say what, some of my favorite cases are when somebody has a charitable interest in mind. I love drafting charitable trusts because that means some wonderful charity is going to benefit at some point in time in the future. Had a great privilege of doing a number of those due to the generosity of the people that we represent. Some instances, being charitable can actually have positive tax benefits as well. And really, we should just seek out those opportunities so that you can be fully informed on whether that would affect you. Those of you that hadn't done anything, don't sweat it. 60% of adult Americans haven't either. It's something we love to procrastinate on. But if you have done nothing, your first problem is that nothing's been done to alleviate any of the excessive costs, delays, and publicity of probate. So ask yourself, what's my biggest expense? I can't ask you because we're not together. But when I do ask this question at workshops, people usually shout out my mortgage or food, housing, food, usually the first ones. You know who your biggest creditor is? The biggest expense? It's the Internal Revenue Service. Most people's biggest expense is taxes. Now, one thing we're looking at a lot recently is retirement savings. How much of that do you think is actually yours? Unless you're in a Roth, you've got a partner in that retirement. That hard-earned money that you've put away to make your golden years awesome is going to be taxed coming out. At this moment or earlier this year, and I don't know after the COVID-related relief funds, it's probably even further out of whack. But at that time, the national debt was equal approximately to the retirement savings on account in this country. Do you think some folks in DC may be interested in taxing that retirement? It's going to happen, and I tell you why I know. The qualified funds, your retirement funds, are not generation transfer devices. It does not transfer without tax. And currently only 5% of retirement funds are not taxable. An act was passed in January. There's been so much news this year that hardly anybody thinks about it, called the Secure Act, which took away what's called the stretch for inherited IRAs away. That means your heirs are going to pay, they have to take the entire amount and pay taxes on it within 10 years of when you die and give it to them. Those are probably going to be in years when they're in their maximum ownership, their earnings capacity. Also, most experts, I believe, agree that we are, in all likelihood, going to see a tax increase next year in 2021 or 2022, regardless of the outcome of the election. So there are things that can be done now which could alleviate problems which could occur later. There are, in effect, my friends, in this country, effectively 2 tax codes, one for the informed and one for the uninformed, right? Be informed. Look at those qualified retirement plans you have and make some good decisions on what you do for your future. Would it be important for you to make your retirement income tax-free? Yep, it can be done. As an example, did you know that the IRS would give you a tax deduction today for a charitable deduction that you don't make until after you die, after both you and your spouse pass away? That's just one example of something that can be done. There are estate taxes, capital gains taxes, and probate. These are all taxes that are voluntary and can be taken care of. Again, all things considered, the shrinkage in most probated estates is 30 to 60%, and that happens 80% of the time. Another thing we can consider is asset protection to keep you safe from lawsuits, liens, judgments, and I like to say your future son-in-law. Had a great story, and it was a lady said, "I hate my son-in-law." And the lawyer said, wait, your daughter's only 8 years old. She said, "I'm getting a head start," right? So let me share another story with you about the importance of planning. A couple has a long and happy life together. Unfortunately, they had a son who had a sports-related injury, and it was a head injury, and he was never going to be able to live independently without some help. Again, they lived a long life, and unfortunately, the wife passed away before the husband. After a sufficient period of mourning, the husband met somebody else, and they married. And about 5 years later, the husband passed away. Unfortunately, he had not planned properly. And so everything that he and his first wife had worked for was now in the control of the second wife. And when the second wife died, nothing went to the brain-injured son, but everything went to the daughter of the second wife, the adult daughter. And ironically, in this case, that daughter had been married to a rock star, and she had been divorced when the rock star met a model. And as a result of that divorce, that daughter was extremely, extremely wealthy. And then she got the inheritance that they really would have needed to go to the brain-injured son. Planning is important. Statistics also show that in America, families typically go from rags to riches, back to rags in 3 generations. It's an incredible statistic. I almost couldn't believe it when I saw it. Have you ever heard that before? Rags to riches to rags, 3 generations. And then there are families who make a multi-generational plan. Would love for you to check out what that might mean for your family. Listen, you have to fight for your family. Nobody else is going to do it for you. I have a question for you. Would it be important to you to preserve what you've earned to pass to whomever you choose? There are an array of tools, devices, methodologies, strategies that can accomplish this. But you can't accomplish it if you aren't informed about what's available to you. You may have a serious but very solvable situation, and you may have some choices. Listen, one of my favorite quotes is, "Our life's made up of the decisions we've made at crossroads." Important decisions. This is a decision you need to make, whether you are going to accomplish your family estate plan and take care of those you love. It's a problem, admittedly, to take advice from people who have something to sell. I've seen this for years in my estate planning practice. So we have created an opportunity analysis. It's an evaluation which provides a review of your total picture, and it's objective because most of the strategies implemented are not something that we would participate on a fee basis on anything. If there are legal documents to implement, we would be available to do that, but you wouldn't even be required to do those with us. It's a really amazing analysis, and I'd love to share it with you. In short, our team helps you earn money, to keep your money, and to share your money with those you love most. Again, you made a big-time commitment to be here. Congratulations and thank you. As I said, what you value is up to you. And I can't make you value anything at all. But as I also said, I've found over the years that most people value something bigger than themselves. If you do care about something, including yourself, or especially if you care about someone, I can help. It'd be my goal for each of you to spend an hour with me in my office. And for that hour to be the most valuable hour you spend with a professional this year. I'd like to offer to each of you a 1-hour consultation with me, and I will waive the $425 fee if you sign up by 6 o'clock tomorrow, Friday, September 18th, for that consultation. During that meeting, you'll get fully informed about what your opportunities and options are. In order to make an appointment, I would ask you to call 904-241-1113. I'm the only one here now, and so you will get a message, and we'll call you back to make that appointment, or you may write info@rocksolidlaw.com, or Shelley, and that's spelled CHELLE, at rocksolidlaw.com, to book an appointment to spend an hour with me looking at what your opportunities are for the future of your estate planning. I very, very sincerely thank you all for spending this, 45 minutes with me.